Do you know which phone this is? I bet you don't, because they all look the same. So, today we are reviewing the Samsung Galaxy A52S. Quite an interesting phone in my opinion. It is a big upgrade over the vanilla A52. It has a better processor, arguably a better camera, a better screen. On the other end, this actually wasn't meant to be an upgrade over A52. It was supposed to be an upgrade over the A52 5G. And to be honest with you, those two phones aren't too different. However, there's a lot to love when it comes to this particular device. And today, we're going to check it out. Let's begin with the design. So, if I say this is a phone made out of plastic and plastic only, I'm sure you might think that it is a very cheaply built phone. But trust me, this phone feels premium despite the polycarbonate back. Polycarbonate, as I said before, is just a fashionable way of saying plastic, but at least it sounds more marketable. This device has a smooth to the touch plastic back which is extremely resistant to smudges. The white looks absolutely gorgeous, and despite an extended period of use amounting to approximately 3 months, it still looks new. The frame of this device is also made out of plastic. It is finished in chrome, which gives it a more premium appearance. Do I blame Samsung for not using glass? I'm actually glad that this device is using polycarbonate. Holding it feels like a breath of fresh air, but I'm glad to use a phone that does not get filled with fingerprints after 5 seconds of holding it. On the right side we have the power button and the volume rocker. On the left side we basically have nothing. The top houses the SIM card tray, which can either house 2 SIMs or a SIM and a microSD card. Who would have thought that you would get a microSD card in 2021? I may be reviewing this device in 2022, but this came out in 2021. The bottom houses the speaker, the Type-C port, and the headphone jack. I repeat, the headphone jack. So on the front we have a 6.5 inches Super AMOLED display with 120Hz refresh rate. You can see the punch hole camera, which is actually quite symmetrical, unlike the Xiaomi. The display is brilliant. It is smooth thanks to the 120Hz display, and since it is a panel made by Samsung, it offers perfect vibrance followed by inky blacks, giving us a contrast that we are so accustomed to from Samsung. So I've been using this phone for 6 months and I will say that my experience has been rather pleasant. Currently it is running Android 12, One UI 4.1, and unlike the Xiaomi, I do not have too many complaints here. Samsung has come a long way from those TouchWiz days. TouchWiz still haunts almost every Android user that was using Samsung back in 2012-2013. It was full of bloatware, it lagged like hell, but today is a different day. It all started with the launch of S6, where they basically accelerated their attempts to make the software experience smoother. Over the years, they've consistently worked on it. S8 was another major overhaul of the entire design. That was when we basically started to see a personality in Samsung's software. Then came the S10, and we had One UI. One UI was basically a complete overhaul of the design language that Samsung was using, with excessive emphasis on one-handed use, and Samsung basically stole the show with that. The usability of Samsung software is so well optimized for single-handed use that there is basically no other smartphone manufacturer that offers a software tailored to single-hand use like Samsung. Sure, you can say that the Pixel phones offer a more coherent experience, but Samsung isn't too far behind. Samsung's aesthetics have matured a lot. They no longer look cartoonish, and I don't have much to complain from Samsung. There are some lags, and I had a freak incident where the phone basically crashed. However, it was only one occasion, and on an Android phone, you can expect such nuisances, especially from a mid-ranger. Battery. Equipped with a 4500 mAh battery, I won't say the battery is remarkable. I mean, it lasts a day. Nothing special. For battery, I am not too impressed, not too disappointed. Just what you would expect from a mid-ranger. The speakers on this phone are quite good. You can actually sense the bass in them. It is, after all, a stereo speaker setup, the main speaker being the bottom firing one, while the earpiece doubles as a secondary speaker. And you will love the added convenience of the headphone jack. So, the buttons. They are quite tactile, and this really matters at this price point. You don't want to use a phone that feels cheap all the time. They nailed it with the build quality, and they nailed it with the tactility of the power button and the volume rocker. Can I say the same about haptics? Unfortunately, no. The haptics aren't exactly tight like the vibration motor used in the higher end phones of Samsung or the iPhones, but why should I compare apples with oranges? This is a $300 phone, and I think the haptics for this price range are acceptable. What about the performance of this phone? Well, it has a 120Hz display, which is quite capable. It scrolls super smoothly, and I haven't faced any hiccups while gaming. Although, as I said, I'm not an avid gamer, it still works well. There are micro stutters here and then, but they're nothing to worry about. Overall, the performance is adequate, and I can't fault it there. Now, let's look into the cameras. With time, cameras have become the major reason to buy a smartphone. And Samsung consistently is improving its camera experience. So it is a quad camera setup, with the main camera being a 64 megapixel quad Bayer sensor with an aperture of 1.8. It has OIS, and it has a 12 megapixel ultra wide camera with an aperture of 2.2. However, the camera is quite wide with a 123 degree field of view. It is a 5 megapixel macro lens and a 5 megapixel depth sensor, both with an aperture of 2.4. The selfie camera is quite healthy when it comes to the megapixel count. It is a 32 megapixel selfie camera. So how is the output? Let's see. Now let's take a look at the image quality out of the main sensor. As you can see here, the image is quite well exposed thanks to the excellent work Samsung has done with their processing. The dynamic range is quite even, all areas are exposed evenly, and Samsung's aggressive noise suppression is working a treat here. There is no visible noise. While there are some oversharpening defects, overall for this price, it's a pretty good image. And in this image of the camera, you can again see the excellent contrast. You can also see how the dynamic range is holding itself together without overexposing the details. And since it is a 64 megapixel sensor outputting 12 megapixel shots, there is plenty of detail in them. This phone is also quite competent when it comes to low light photography. The dynamic range, again, does not fall apart. Samsung's noise suppression is again doing its job here. While you can say the resolve detail isn't the best, for this price bracket, I'm perfectly happy with it. The ultra wide is actually quite wide thanks to the 120 degree field of view. Colors aren't as good as the main sensor, and in low light photos, it doesn't do the best job. The 5 megapixel camera is quite detailed, and you can actually take quite impressive shots with the macro camera. So now let's check the selfie camera. Well, as you can see, my fur have been exposed evenly. You can make out the fine details in every single strand present on my body. That is thanks to the 32 megapixel sensor that is actually taking better pictures than most flagships out there. I don't use a selfie camera, but for what it's worth, it's a pretty good one. And what about the samples from the depth sensor? Well, I'd rather leave out this gimmick because I am frankly getting very tired of it. I have used phones with a single camera that take perfectly competent pictures that are arguably better than the portraits from this phone. For example, the Pixel 2 and the Pixel 1. Please bear in mind that this is not a detailed review of the camera. A separate video is being planned for that, in which we will compare several other devices to form a conclusion. But right now, it is time for the conclusion of this device. Would I recommend it? in Pakistan, this is still selling for around 75,000 rupees. I mean, you have the Xiaomi 11T, which is more or less priced in the same region, that has much better specs. But will I prefer it? Not without using it. I have had an awful experience with the software, and if you look at a phone with a utilitarian perspective, you can't go wrong with this phone. Buy this phone while you still can. Take care.